Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Welcome to the month of March. It is already the third month of the year. Remember the goals you set out for yourself at the beginning of the year? Are you still committed to achieving them like you were on January 1st? Remember, goals are like having your headlights on, but you have to take action to accomplish them. We are sharing in the month of March some great guests on the Charge Podcast. Our guests this month share their expertise on how to be a giver in your life, learn how to create revenue from e-commerce business, strategies to communicate with your clients, and why living into your passion is so important to living your best life. If you're feeling frustrated and stressed out with your professional and personal life, I know in each of these podcasts, the strategies that each guest shares can propel you to live a charged life in 2021. Chargers are committed to finding how each day they can make their life better by their willingness to learn, grow, and become the person they were meant to be. In my recently published book, Cultivate Positive Culture, 10 Actions to Faithful Living, I shared this quote: "Give yourself permission to charge each day to become the person you were meant to be." You've made a great choice in listening to this podcast. Remember, the podcast is named Charge after my mantra: create habits around real goals every day. Let's get recharged in this podcast to influence a positive culture so you can take simple positive actions each day. Are you ready? Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you back this week for another great guest. Our goal each week is to share great guests with you. And it's hard to believe it's already 2021, but we've had great guests for you each and every week. So this week is no different. We've got Sean Campbell. Sean has been training, mentoring, and educating all his life. An exceptionally well-regarded conference speaker and author, Sean has delivered talks for Fortune 50 companies and top-tier conferences. He has also been the author of several books on technical as well as business topics. Sean has also been a professional service firm owner for over 20 years. His professional services work has spanned consulting engagements with the Fortune 50 companies and startups you've heard of, the sale of his first professional service company, and the growth of delivery of sales, marketing, and operational practices inside professional services firms. In short, Sean brings a wealth of knowledge when it comes to surviving and thriving as a service firm owner or the leader of a practice area inside a larger services firm. Sean, it is great to have you on the Charge Podcast. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Sorry I was a little late, too. I think I caused you a little extra angst because I'm probably not the only late guest, but that was me today. But thanks for having me on regardless.
No problem. We're glad we were able to hook up because I think you've got some great information to share with the Chargers and can't wait to get into it. But before I do, I always ask every guest the same question. It's my mantra. It's Charge. Create habits around real goals every day. What habit or habits you think led to success in your life?
Honestly, that's pretty easy for me. I just always keep learning. And I know that seems really kind of elemental, but I honestly think at a certain point in life, people get really comfortable. And by learning, I don't mean like just continuing to master whatever you know, the whole 10,000 hours thing. I mean, that's useful too. Like, I've got things that I think I've kind of spent a lot of time on in life and gotten better at. But I mean learning things you kind of suck at initially. That's what I mean. I mean also reading things you disagree with from the get-go. Like that kind of learning where you actually kind of expose yourself to thoughts that, on the surface you actually disagree with, right? I mean, like, not to talk about the election, but when you're watching the returns, flip between Fox and CNN. Don't just watch CNN and tell yourself what Fox is saying. Go back and forth and challenge yourself a little bit. And I'm sure there are people that are going, there's nothing on either one of those based on what camp they're in that I would ever listen to. And I think that's really the biggest thing for me is I've always done that. I think at a certain point in life, people get comfortable and they focus in on like, I just want to do what I do. You know, I love baseball. I do personally. So, you know, I just go to baseball games, right? But like at 40, I learned how to ski. Learning how to ski at 40 and watching your teenager just run loops around you for 3 years till you could actually get good at it is challenging, right? And the same thing's true even just on a personal level with like hobbies and stuff. Like here's a side one, and then we can, you know, I don't want to give you too long of an answer to a question, but like I play Call of Duty and shooters. I'm 50. I posted on Facebook just yesterday, hey, I'm looking for additional people to play with, right? I play with my teenagers and stuff, and I've got a reasonable KD, especially for a 50-year-old. But, like, literally, my Facebook feed was full of people my age saying, what's COD? What you know, why do you do that? And I'm like, okay, well, but I don't mind challenging myself trying to do something. Sure, I have lower reaction time than my 17-year-old, but like, you know, it's okay. They make shotguns for guys like me. You know,
that's right.
You know, spray and pray is a fine strategy, right? But I think that's really the fundamental piece. And I could talk about that for a while, and the last thing I'd say on it is just that to reemphasize that point, especially today, I think it's incredibly dangerous for us to just stay in the very narrow lane of media and information and whatever. And notice I didn't pick a political side there. I just think it's dangerous. And you've got to go out, and business ownership's the same, by the way. Like business owners get kind of ossified and they're like, this is the way sales is, this is the way marketing is, this is the way product development is. And then they get nuked by some young kid, and honestly, it wasn't because the young kid's smarter. He was just learning, and you weren't. That's my honest truth.
Yeah, what a great lesson to really start with, and really challenging yourself. And I love that, because we could go 10 different ways there. We won't right now, but that it really, I think the message is be willing, be open, and be willing, like you said, see two different viewpoints. And in business owners, we have business owners on this podcast. What do you need to be looking at differently now that it's 2021 versus what you did 5 years ago or 10 years ago? We know it's out of date if it's 10 years old, but what did you even do last year? And of course, it was a very challenging year with COVID, with all the challenges we have, and we still have that some, but what do you need to do differently? And it really allows you to set that up. Sean, share with me, because I have a feeling part of your philosophy came in is kind of what your story is, how you got into the business that you're in, and with your consulting practice and what you've done in the professional services firm. But can you share with how kind of that road started for you?
Yeah. Honestly, it is kind of similar. I'm the guy in my personal life who is like constantly learning something and then teaching it to somebody else, and learning something and teaching it to somebody else. Not because it's an ego thing. I mean, sure, it's fun to teach people stuff. You know what I mean? If you ask any instructor, they're like, hey, it's cool to be up in the front of the room talking to people. But, but at the end of the day, that was the kernel that led me into this, because my first business, I was an independent trainer, and basically doing training on Microsoft technologies and tech stacks and that kind of stuff, and basically kind of being hired to do that. And then that led to a growth in that company where we did a lot of work for Microsoft and Intel, and we did a lot of like building presentations and demos and, training content and that kind of stuff. And then that led to this company after I sold the first one, where we do a lot of research. And that's, again, a very like educate, learn about the market, see what's happening in technology. And I also picked a sector that is constantly changing. I mean, who's leading in tech changes, maybe not every year, but it changes pretty dramatically from day to day, and so that's also interesting, right? I don't know if I could have been in an industry that's kind of just slow moving and there's just a couple titans and nothing really changes. So all of that kind of, I've got to learn something and I've got to pass it on, has been at the heart of what I've done for a long time. And even my hobbies are the same, whether it's coaching baseball or teaching at a university level as an adjunct faculty, or just leading a growth group at my house. I've always kind of been in that position. So that and honestly, professional services work in general is a great place to be if you like doing that kind of work.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, in professional service firms, is how can we kind of really take that? What do we need to look at and really be able to move forward? And it becomes a constant learning curve. But I think one of the challenges that we have, and we have it in all types of businesses, so it's not just in professional services firm, but what would you share are some essential tips to keep in mind when we're communicating with our clients to really be able to connect with them?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest ones is be careful about making a point while you're writing. And this is especially true as we went through a year of, who knows how long COVID will continue in small fits and starts, right? But I mean, like, we've gone through some interesting challenges with COVID, and it forced everybody to go back and work from home. And it also forced another thing that I think we'll end up talking about in years to come, which is that it forced everybody to become better writers, or at least expose the people who weren't good writers. And by that, I mean, the person who was very used to communicating in person, flying to an office, sitting in the hallway, could watch a reaction when they said something maybe a little stupid or a little too forward, or they were the jovial one who used a little off-color jokes, heaven forbid, or whatever. You can't do much of that in email. You can't. And even video calls, it's a little harder to pick up some of the signals, and you never know if the client's going to show up on video, right? Maybe they're tired of being on video today, so they're just going to show up on the phone. And so it forces you to write a lot more. And to go back to what I said originally, too many people, when they're asking for something, they can't help themselves but try to make a point along with it, like especially if the client's been difficult. And so we'll coach our staff, like, that needs to be a separate email. If the client's been difficult, if the client's struggling, if the client's not responding back to us in time and you're asking for something, don't do that horrible passive-aggressive thing where you write something at the bottom of the email where you try to make a point. You can get away with that in person in a way that's very different. And in some, I think we've probably either made better writers during the time of COVID, although those people probably don't think of it that way, but that's really what had to happen, or we've just exposed those who aren't. And I'd say that's probably one of the bigger things that comes to mind when communicating with clients, at least in the last year or two that we're in.
Yeah. And I think that's so key, is because I think too many people forget that when they're writing and sending an email, that they forget sometimes that they need to be communicating what points they need to really come out of it, because we may share a lot of information, but we have a lot of times we're very bad about saying, this is what I need, and making that highlight out, because people scan now on email.
Well, right, exactly. And honestly, it does play out even in in-person interactions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a phrase that somebody I used to teach with in the college setting used to say all the time. They said, start hard, get easy, meaning it was the mantra of all teachers. If you start easy and get hard, you've lost the class. And it's why most of our best teachers that we've known in our life tend to have, like, the first week we're not sure if we're going to like them, right? The best baseball coaches, the best whatever, we're like, I don't know if I like this person. Yeah. And in the end, and the ones that, if we really are honest with ourselves, the ones that were, like, always letting you out, right? And I love my mother. But my mother, for example, great teacher in some ways, I didn't stay grounded for more than an hour. You know what I mean? She was not a start hard, get easy kind of temperament. You know what I mean? So, like, in many ways. And so, that had its impacts later in my life, let's just say, right? So, and probably made me more of a start hard, get easy with my own kids. But where I'm going with this is that, like, too many people, I think, try to think they're kind of masters of deception, I guess. They talk to clients, they talk to people, and they're like, well, let me maneuver around this, and I won't bring it up directly, and, we'll all kind of get to it. I am surprised by how many times people are incredibly disarmed by a consultant, by a business professional who just drops the problem on the table at the start of the call. You're not that good at deception. And honestly, what is deception going to give you anyway? You still got to bring it up before you get to the end of the call regardless. So, like, I think hitting people directly with the information right at the start is potentially threatening to the person delivering it, because you don't really know what the reaction is going to be. But in the end, it's a much better way to fly. So most of the time what I see wrong when people are trying to deliver bad news is they're always sandbagging it. We're kind of in the era of everybody's their own like public relations entity or something, and they're trying to like, use broad words and, vague descriptions. And it's like, honestly, everybody can see through that. We're all good at that. So there's kind of an authenticity from just like dropping the problem right in front of people, right? I joke in my company that, we obviously do well by people, right? Otherwise we wouldn't be around after this much time. But being the CEO, one of your jobs, I say, is to wear the asbestos suit. You have to get into meetings and be the person that lays the bad news. And I've just learned over the years, it's much better to just drop it right on the table in the beginning.
Yeah, it kind of sets the stage and really allows you to move forward and really figure out how are we going to handle this situation that we have. One thing, Sean, I love about you talk a lot and you've shared before, I think with some of the books that you wrote, is you really talk about culture. And to me, that's a big one. I've been a small business owner all my life, and I knew the difference that it make. And I love kind of the statement that culture isn't what you give people, but it really how you shape them. What's your philosophy behind that?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I mean, I live in the land of the technology industry, right? And the reason I bring that up is if there is a business industry that exists to give 20-somethings everything they ever desired in terms of fringe benefits, it is the technology sector. I mean, I have dined in campus cafeterias in the technology sector that are better than some restaurants, maybe even most restaurants around the campus. You know what I mean? I remember I went to Dassault Systems in Paris once, and they had filet mignon for $6 American. You know what I mean? Like in the cafeteria. I mean, this is a far cry from, for those listening who know the movie Rudy. I grew up in Chicago. I now live in Oregon, but I grew up in the southeast side of Chicago near Gary, saw the steel mills, not from my window, but close enough that I could drive to them. And, I grew up with blue-collar people, right? That in the steel mill, they didn't really give you lunch. You brought it with you. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so where I'm going with this is that culture has become this really weird gift-giving exercise. It's like what can we gift them? And what I found, and what the data shows too, is the minute you gift your employees something, and I want to be really careful here because I love our employees. I'm not saying this is like endemic to my employees or makes employees bad. It's just human nature. Once we gift you a greater 401k or a better cafeteria or better hardware or y'all get new Macs today, what happens a lot of times is that it becomes just table stakes then, because it's just part of the foundation of what their employment is. And so you can't really make people happy just by gifting them more and more stuff. And I see a lot of like HR directors fall into this. I see a lot of like heads of culture fall into this. I see, and at the end of the day, they don't really care. They stay because they're being shaped. And that ties into one other thing that we may or may not get to, is that as much as I love training and as much as I love teaching, I've come to realize over the years that like, well, there's a place for it. I mean, I don't think we should get rid of colleges, for example, or whatever. Apprenticing someone and using an apprenticeship model over an extended period of time beats out any training. And there's some reasons why we don't do it, and there's reasons why we should. But that's the shaping. That's the shaping that makes people stay. I mean, if you think of the business leaders that you've felt like, to listeners, that you feel like have been the ones you admire the most, I doubt you're going to remember all the things they gifted you. Like they took you to a nice dinner, or they took you on that business trip, or even the salaries they gave you to some degree. They fade. You tend to remember the people that shaped you. They shaped your career. They shaped your goals. They gave you skills. That matters more. And we've turned it into this really weird, like, Christmas shopping season exercise for, like, culture building. And the final thing I'd say on it is it's not only wrong, it's wasteful. Because at the end of the day, you're just chasing tail. You can't ever give people enough gifts to make a great culture. But you can spend time in shaping them through apprenticeship. And that has a cost, but I think the ROI on it is way, way higher than the gift giving.
Yeah. Well, you and I have similar philosophies there, because to me, it's not about the gifts, not about the extras. it's about the environment you create, and then it's about like you said, you're shaping the individuals, because that's what people want. They want, how can I become better? Not only as a better apprentice in that line of work, but also as a person. They want the
Amen.
mentors, coaches. There's all the research shows that if you do that within your company, you're growing them. Number one, some business owners get worried because, of course, we grow them, then they're going to leave us. Well, if you don't grow them, they're for sure going to leave you. So,
well, right, and if you grow them, honestly, they surprise you. They add things to your business you hadn't thought of. They take on responsibilities that you haven't considered before, right? And so I think, yeah, I mean, to your point, you only have two choices anyway. So why not take the more noble one and shape them and grow them? And I agree, as human beings too. I mean, that's another thing we're a little fearful of these days, I think. Yeah. I think we're a little fearful of talking to the employee about who they are as a person. And I'm not saying you should have carte blanche to do that. There's a million things that could go wrong if you just said, I can say anything I want to say to an employee. Obviously, that is not appropriate. But at the same time, to treat them as really just a job description, that doesn't work either. I mean, and I think this is especially true of millennials. And again, I say this with some hesitancy because our staff always listens, but it's not like they haven't heard this from me before. Is millennials like? And I'll make this brief because I don't know if you want to spend time on this or not, but I'll just throw this in for an additional thing. Is like sure. Millennials like to be promoted. They were the everybody got a trophy culture. Yes. Right? You know what I mean? They were. Exactly. This isn't debatable, right? I coached baseball. It was very different than when I played baseball. Let's just put it that way. You know what I mean? Every single 5-year-old got a little trophy. I do not remember these dynamics when I played baseball. So, and I lead a sales team and a marketing team. Sales and marketing, by definition, should be a meritocracy. It's about, have you driven leads? Have you driven engagement? Have you driven sales? So where I go with this is that I think there's a little flaw in the way we manage millennials, and maybe even a big flaw, in that a lot of these structures are set up to give them micro promotions, title changes all the time, that kind of thing. And that's fine if they're going that way. But at the end of the day, they want to be apprenticed. They want to learn. They've almost not had their whole lives someone saying to them, you suck at this, but I'm going to help you get better. What they've mostly had is, everybody struggles to ski. I mean, everybody falls. As opposed to somebody who says, okay, I just got to be honest, like, you really don't know how to ski. But I'm going to be here for you to teach you how to ski. And there's a great relationship that I think my generation, again, I'm 50, can have with millennials. It does not have to be open warfare. I think we have a responsibility, actually, to do both of those things. And I think my generation, to some extent, has either been frightened by millennials or annoyed by millennials or challenged by millennials. Not me personally. We got tons of millennials in the building. But I've come to think that that's one of the things we can offer that generation as leaders is some really straight talk, followed immediately by real commitment to apprentice them. And I think if you do both, I think millennials thrive. They do. And then you can give them all the promotions and other stuff that you want to do, but they're giving it in an area of authenticity then. So I went a little longer than I said. But
No, I think that's a great point. And I've done some research on it and wrote a book, actually, a small book, 21 Ways to Attract, Retain, and Engage Millennials. And the big thing they want to be coached and developed and move forward. And an interesting part is now we can put Generation Z in there. In the earlier research that I've seen so far, they want that same thing. And what's got to change is we have this mindset. I'm 53, so we're in that same category. We have this mindset that we just automatically got it. And I don't think if we look back, we didn't. And the thing is, it goes way back in history. I show in the context when I did the research, Peter the Hermit was talking about the generations and how these youth of today don't understand what we know of tomorrow. And normally I won't put the date up, but Peter the Hermit said that back in 1274. So we have to.
No, that's a great point. I mean, a lot of what we forget sometimes is like, okay, do we want to become the Roman Empire again? There were a million things that were wrong about the Roman Empire. But if you look at how people were wired, the wet wiring in our brains, we haven't really evolved that much. You know what I mean? We have the same passions, the same desires, the same foibles. We've got all this stuff that's the same. And I think we kind of make a mistake when we assume we've evolved past all that stuff just in a couple thousand years, right? And yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Well, some great points. And one thing I wanted to ask you, because you talk about this, and I know it's important to you, is, and it's important in every business, but why do you think firm finances and analysis are sometimes that afterthought? Because I think that's in every business, not just in professional services form. And what can we do about it? Because I see that too many times. We're in the new 2021. And sometimes when I get in the fourth quarter with my coaching clients, they don't even know where they're at yet. They know they're paying the bills, but it becomes that afterthought. And I'm the same way as you. I think I want to know where I'm at throughout the process.
Right. Well, I think part of there's so many things to it. Part of it is it's not exciting. I mean, talking to clients. I mean, for your average. I mean, unless you are like a CPA or a financial advisor and that's your business. Well, we're not talking to you. I'm sure your finances are great. You probably have a problem selling and marketing, so we'll talk to you about something else. But but if I think part of it is it's not that exciting. It's easy to turn away from. I think part of it is that it's easier to live in a land of kind of self-satisfaction. You're making clients happy. You're getting the ego gratification of that. And the books bring that down to some reality. I think that's important. And I think the last thing is just, if it's not your skill set to do the books, find somebody who will. This is the part-time CFO kind of model. This is finding a bookkeeper. This is like, I don't know how many times I talk to like a business owner, and you start scratching the book, how are you doing with the finances and all this stuff? And they're like, oh, my receipts are in the proverbial shoebox, or, I don't really know where this is or whatever. And I'm like, look, the government's going to come for you one of these days. You know what I mean? And the fact that you thought it was cute to like go buy a truck on whatever thing you read on, CNNfinancial.com, with some weird tip you got. Like, this is not something to play around with, right? So I think there's just this mix of things that go into it that make it really challenging. And I would just advocate that if it's not your skill set from day one, hire it out. There are plenty of people that will do your books, that will report on your financials, that will hold you accountable, that will say things to you like, yes, and this is maybe the last thing I'd say, this same person will say things to you that you won't like but are super important to hear. Yes, you worked hard. You made not enough money. Yeah. Because you need reality. You need people to tell you those things, right? Or like, yeah, you're juiced about that sales trip you're on. You still need to give me all your receipts, right? And you still got to file them away. And you just need somebody to do that. In my life, oddly enough, for the entire time of the business, that's been my wife. My wife has basically done, in both businesses we've had, this business now has 20 employees, so she's really done a lot of amazing stuff over the years, and learned a ton. But she does AR and AP, and she's the one who's on me like, honey, I know you're really juiced about that trip and you met all kinds of great people, but I still need the receipt from the Starbucks. Kind of thing. Like you can't. And
you're making me feel good, Sean, because my wife's the same way.
Yeah. I've given her this ball of receipts, and she's like, and she'll say, but they're not all in here. And there's a part of my brain that wants to go, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter. I did good. And then I'm like, no. She's right. I need to give her all this stuff, and I need to do a better job. And same thing she does with looking over the taxes. And as the company grew, we even hired a part-time CFO to kind of do a different level of analysis and modeling. But if you're not spending time on this, or you don't have a good partner, you're just going to fly your business right into the side of the sun. Yeah. Like you just are at some point. And I think people just don't think that's going to happen to them because they're lucky or who knows what.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you shared that in several scenarios, very similar, because just got credit card statement. And my wife came in yesterday and said, I don't have these two invoices from you. Where are they? So now I feel good that I'm not the only one who gets that happen to. So thank you for that. But the key is, what are you going to do differently with that? That's the thing, is because we have some business owners sitting there. No, that's a challenge for them. How are you going to change? Because that becomes the key, because then you know what's transacting and going on in your business. And you don't have to have the expertise, because we know that it may be exhausting for yourself to do that. well, then find that right person. That's what Sean's sharing with you. Some great information there. Sean, we could continue on forever, I think, for this conversation, but because of time limits and kind of getting in that time frame, I want to really go to the recharge round and ask you some questions there. And they're kind of based off of my framework. And I know you have philosophies, but one is like with your mindset, how do you believe that affects your daily living?
Well, I think because I see everything as like an opportunity, as a way to learn, like we talked about before, life's a lot more fun. I mean, like I'm constantly trying to like master something, learn something. I mean, let me give you an example. Like during the really rough time with COVID, right? I said to my family, I said, hey, two teenagers, right? And we're all trapped in the house. And I said, the least thing we could have at the end of this is a really decent looking yard. Like we're all stuck at home, right? You know what I mean? So we built a fire pit. We went out and did stuff. I downloaded Duolingo, and I've been trying to like learn Spanish and German just because my kid's doing German, right? I mean, I think people don't just look at life as a learning exercise. I mean, again, not just mastery. So anyway, so it ties back to what I said before. It's as simple as that for me. Life doesn't get boring because I feel like I'm always learning.
What do you do daily to bring energy into your life?
Well, it's funny because I give my wife some credit for this answer. So I told her like this podcast was happening since you mentioned your wife and I mentioned mine, and I said, I said, what do you think about this one? And she goes, well, you have a Labrador. So that was like, and I thought that was so. His name is Wrigley, and he is fairly Wrigley. And so his name, by the way, was so named because I said, because you have to yell out loud at puppies to get them to come back. Whenever I said, I am not going to be yelling out across a campground, Puddle Boots or whatever name. I need a manly sounding dog name that I can yell and not seem strange about it. So that that was part of it. The other thing is, I just go have an experience. I mean, that's usually what I do. I mean, if I start to get like, oh, this is boring, what am I going to do? I'm like, okay, new book, new type of movie, go skiing, go take a drive. You know what I mean? I'm very unlikely to just kind of sit and wallow that life isn't giving me something fun to do. If anything, I'm more the opposite to the people around me. I'm like, let's go race 50-mile-an-hour go-karts at Pat's Acres, just a place by us. That's not a promo hit. That's just a place we go sometimes. It's like, just do something fun that gets you engaged. I mean, Don't sit on the couch.
Great answer. Share the number one connection that's made the biggest impact on your life.
Well, I would. It's a short, quick list. One, it's my faith. I grew up Catholic, fairly borderline agnostic at times. My faith really, really has grown over the last 10 or 15 years, and I honestly. I can't think of anything that's more important to me than that in terms of just giving me a center. And as a business relationship, it gave me a place to put my identity that wasn't just in my accomplishments. And obviously I could talk longer about that, but that's it. And my wife and my kids are huge and on so many ways. And the last thing is honestly pets. I mean, there's nothing about like a Labrador. We got two cats too, not to leave them out, but cats are different, And so my Labrador, I mean, he just looks up at you from the couch and like, come on, let's go outside. Let's go play. Let's go do something. You know what I mean? And it's amazing what a pet will do, the right kind of pet to keep you active and doing stuff too.
We've had a Labrador, and we've got two cats too. So I knew there were several things we have in common. We're finding them, aren't we? What advice has influenced you the most in your life?
There's a few quick things I'd hit, like super fast. One is a quote from a Jefferson biography, President Jefferson. I'm actually doing this thing, talk about learning. Like, I look at all the stuff that's happened in America. I'm like, I'm going to read a biography of every president because I might as well learn what these guys went through. So I'm up to John Quincy Adams now. But there's this quote in the Jefferson biography that reflects something I've thought about on and off my life. He says, how much pain have cost us the evils which have never happened? And I think we really need to keep stuff like that in mind because at the end of the day, especially as a business owner, it's very easy to look back and kind of say, should I have done it differently? Should I have whatever? I think that's a big one. And one other one that's a slightly funny story that's always helped me in business, and my sales team hears it all the time, is I worked at restaurants high school all the way through college. I actually met my wife at one called the Signature Room Restaurant in Chicago, top floor of the 95th floor of the Hancock Building in Chicago. I violated company policy by asking her out. So, anyway, so long story short, I worked there for a long time, great job. And I was there about 2-3 days in the beginning. And you made a ton of money there. In the early 90s, I made like $400 a night, like literally, at least a couple hundred. It was a high-end restaurant. But I was part of a 4-person waiter team. And there was this guy who'd been there about 20 years named Aubert. And I was all excited about the money I was making the first couple nights. It's fine, because I'd worked at Olive Gardens and other places where I couldn't make as much money, and I was trying to pay my way through my graduate degree. So second or third night, I'm sitting there and I'm counting all this cash that the team's been given. This is a 4-person waiter team, so I got like $800 in my pocket, and it's only 8 o'clock at night for the team. Aubert comes up behind me, and he's like this 4'3" guy, like shaped like a gourd. He's like as wide as he is tall. And he goes up behind me and slams his hand on the table and he says, "Don't count the chickens." And he storms away. And I was completely like, I was this 23-year-old kid. This guy just rolls off. And he was nice to me later. And to this day, when my team is like, "We had a great sales quarter, everything's going to be awesome," or like, I just got off a phone call with a client, I'm like, "Don't count the chickens." And so like it has to be in the bank for it to act. And even my to tie it back to finance. What's my favorite report to look at in the QuickBooks? The balance sheet.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if all that activity didn't turn itself into money in the bank account, and it's not about being focused on the money, it's just focused on the actual fact that all those activities actually led to profit. So anyway, so that's the other thing.
Okay, great. Recommend your favorite book, and why do you love it?
Well, I mentioned my faith, so I'd be remiss to not mention the Bible, but because that's obviously at the top. The other ones from business would be David Maister, Managing the Professional Services Firm. It's a slightly older book, but an absolute classic. Anything from Alan Weiss, who goes by the Contrarian Consultant, is really, really good. And honestly, anything on World War II history. When I was a young kid, I read a ton of World War II history, and you learn a lot of geography, you learn a lot of geopolitics, you learn a lot about struggle and strife and heroism, and I still read a lot on World War II history today.
Okay. What legacy do you want to leave the world?
This may be a slightly non-traditional answer, and it's I've come to feel over the years that like when I hear people answer a question like this, they say like, I want to leave a business, I want to grow this, I want to touch the world, I want to save children in Africa. I don't have any problem with those bigger goals. I think the thing, especially in America or any first world country, that we keep forgetting though is that like if we just made our homes great and we did nothing else, it would all be fine. If you focused on your kids and you focused on your wife and they felt loved and they felt respected and they felt engaged with, and you looked at what they cared about and you spent time with them, and sure, when you've got time, extend that out to your family. I think that's the legacy I want to have. I want to have somebody say, he really cared about, did not care about anything else, but he cared about raising a great home and a great family. Because if we all did that, we almost wouldn't need to do any of the other stuff. And so often, everybody's focused on the externalities. Is my business going to be great? Can I do this? Can I do that? And their house is a shambles. And they make excuses for that. And I think if you really look at it, as dads and moms and, sons and daughters and, whatever role the Labradors have to play in all this, you know what I mean? Like, we build great homes. And that's what I want to leave. I just want my kids to know that, that's what I was focused on. And yeah, maybe I achieved some other stuff along the way, but at the end of the day, that's what I want to be known for. And I don't think that's selfish. I think that's righteous.
Yeah, I love that, Sean, because I tell you, if we start from the home, we're going to then take that and you get the ripple effect that's outside of that. And it's a real challenge. I mean, every country has faced it, but the United States, we faced with COVID, and people said they've had more time to slow down. Now the question mark will answer as we move away from this time. Will it just be a time in history, kind of that dash that's in the middle of our birthday and the day we pass away? Or will we use that time wisely and really realize what's most important? And I think that's one of the things that hopefully for a lot of people come out is life is precious. And if we start at the home, then we can cascade that out to the other areas. See how I kind of used your name there?
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, no, completely agree.
Well, Sean, I can't thank you enough for saying yes to the Charge podcast. Some great nuggets of wisdom there. And I can't wait to share this with the Chargers, let them hear it. Before we do that, share with them how they can reach out to you, connect with you, and we'll put it in show notes also. So if they want to reach out, they can do it.
Sure. So, if you're a B2B technology company and you have research or marketing needs, you're a good fit for us. If you're not, you're not. And on the other hand, if you're not and you just want to talk about business or professional services or growth, I'm always happy to be a mentor and apprentice folks. You don't have to be a paying client. My email's not that hard to find on the web, so I don't mind giving it out. It's just Sean, SEAN, @cascadeinsights.com. I'd give you my phone, but I hardly ever pick it up. So email me. That's probably the best. And www.cascadeinsights.com for the company.
Well, Sean, thank you again for joining us on the Charge podcast. It was a pleasure having you on.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Chargers, I hope you really go back. I made some notes myself and decide where do you want to start. Sean gave some real nuggets. Maybe if you're a business owner, maybe you want to start in the culture area. Maybe if you're thinking about for yourself, what do you want to learn new in 2021? Why don't you decide what you want that to be and take action on it and start? Sean kind of brought up interesting for me. I've been kicking this around and I'm going to go ahead and do it. I want to learn some Spanish myself so I can have the Duolingo and pick up that app and start on that process. So I appreciate him kind of setting that out. Maybe it's with your family. Maybe you want to start right there. Some traditions that you want to have with your family and really allow that to become your ripple effect. Chargers, we'll come back next week with another great guest, but thanks for joining us. Please like and share the podcast and let others know about it. That's how we keep growing. Make it a great day.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.